So I think I'd like to start by just giving the floor to our panelists to reflect upon how the work of GS1 alongside your respective organizations helps to protect patient safety. So just some key reflections before we dig in with some questions for myself and the audience.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to join today, and thanks for that talk, which is actually very timely. So I think I'll start a little bit about thinking about illegal medicines, and certainly the criminal market is dominated on the online trade today in medicinally controlled drugs, but also there's a whole range of drugs which are available. Basically, almost any medicine can be bought online illegally, and as you've just told us, it's a multi-billion-pound business, and it really puts patients at significant risk because many of these sites are very sophisticated and they look completely legitimate. It's actually quite hard to determine that they're not. And I suppose the key safety message here is don't buy prescription medicines online without talking to your healthcare professional. That's a sort of a very basic message that we need to get across to people, that they're not lifestyle products. They are prescription medicines, and they should be prescribed according to the indication. So just sort of thinking about this has been obviously the serialisation through the Falsified Medicines Directive, which actually is in the EU and produces harmonised measures to ensure medicines are safe. And they have a number of mandatory safety measures. And I remember being in this room probably 3 years ago now and asking about that, about FMD in relation to the UK. So I would say that such a sort of a procedure is only effective if it's got 100% reconciliation. And if not everything is serialised, and you don't have it serialised across the whole supply chain, it would be impossible potentially to detect re-entry of stolen goods. And while we don't have that currently applied in the UK, there is no evidence currently that disapplication of the Falsified Medicine Directive has resulted in any statistically increase of falsified medicines into the UK supply chain. And I think that the key point here is that we're talking about the legal supply chain in that case, and in many of your examples, we're talking about sort of online illegal supply of medicine. And I think we need to differentiate between those two scenarios. I think in the UK, we do undertake a number of really proactive safety measures to protect the UK supply chain. We have UK inspections, we have seizures, we have internet-based enforcement and public health campaigns. And the MHRA is actually currently the only global medicines regulator with an in-house criminal enforcement unit. And I think you very nicely highlighted that yesterday we had one of our biggest campaigns in the history of the Criminal Enforcement Unit at the MHRA, arrested 12 suspects, employed many enforcement agents across the country, and seized hundreds of thousands of doses of medicines. And that includes many controlled drugs, including opioid painkillers and anti-anxiety medicines, as well as over £100,000 in cash, luxury watches, suspected criminal assets which we can seize. And it's many of these procedures where we're really looking to intervene and prevent this illegal trade. We also have, obviously, the Fake the Facts website as well in the UK. I suppose the only point I would also make about UDIs is that, I know we're talking about medicines here, but in terms of devices, that will be a key advancement. Just a sort of small correction in that the post-market surveillance legislation that's just been raised will strongly encourage the implementation of unique device identifiers, but it's actually the pre-market legislation which will be laid later this year and hopefully come into force next summer, which will start to mandate that, and there will be a period of implementation before that's brought into an enforceable legal position. So medical devices, the plan is, if Parliament agrees the legislation, for it to be mandated from July 28 and for in vitro diagnostics from July 2030. But we strongly encourage the implementation much earlier than that, because many of those technological solutions are dependent on that serialisation and the ability to track whether it's a medicine or a device across the supply chain. So I think that that's absolutely key, and GS1 standards, of course, are a critical part of that, and I think are globally used more than 90%. So maybe in the interest of time, I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. I'd like to move on to Elizabeth then. We do see that these falsified medicines are also driven by things like medicines shortages. So how will you think about using the unique identifier to enable the mitigation of medicine shortages, the electronic package leaflet support? How does all that play into patient safety?
Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity. And of course, as Alison referenced, FMD is our instrument in the EU for ensuring the security of the legal supply chain, as you mentioned. FMD is a work in progress, so it's only just February. In February, have Italy and Greece implemented, so it's still not at full implementation. But the Commission has recently concluded in their report on the status that FMD and the use of the GS1 standards, which are integral to the safety standards in FMD, are really placing barriers in the way of criminalization in the legal supply chain. And the subject close to my heart is the fact that having the data matrix code and the global trade item number on the packages in the EU is going to give us a lot of other really good synergies. And
2 for 1.
Yes, exactly. And maybe 3 or 4 for 1 potentially. And the one close to my heart is the fact that we want to deliver the information to patients directly from the medicine box in their hand by a scan of their phone. So we want them to be able to scan the exact same code that's used for FMD and see the package leaflet, the electronic package leaflet, on their phone in their preferred language. So, we have multilingual package leaflets which are not available to patients because patients can't access them at the moment. And a very important use case here is shortages, because medicines are moved all the time between EU countries in order to mitigate shortages. And then we always face the difficulty how to give the information to patients in their local language. It's there, it's translated, but how can we give that to patients? Do we open every box, take out the paper package leaflet, put in another package leaflet? So I think we are hopefully going to move forward towards the full implementation of FMD and also gain other synergies in other use cases from that serialization with the help of the GS1 standards.
So that's so interesting. What other features will potentially also be linked to this? You mentioned there might be a couple.
I think that not just medicine shortages, but actually just making medicines available for small markets, because having to put in different package leaflets can sometimes be a barrier to making medicines available to small markets. But in addition, delivering patient safety and use information to the patient in an accessible format. I mean, I'm a certain age, and I have to say the package leaflet is not so accessible for me. I need to, really squint sometimes to see where I need to be. So there are many opportunities actually to give that information in a more accessible format, for example, to patients with low digital literacy, providing video content more easily, and so on. So we have a lot of good and interesting use cases there.
And I'm sure that'll have, especially for devices where adherence is such a difficult aspect, that the video feature is very interesting. So Jo, over to you now. In terms of the GS1 standards, what do you think the implementation challenges are in the UK?
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely feel like the fake on the panel. For one, I'm not Rahul as per your brochure today, so I apologise for that. And also, I'm not regulatory. I'm a clinician who works in clinical standards. So I am definitely coming at this from an implementation angle, and it's very different to what you guys are seeing regulatory. And I've worked in standards for over 25 years now, and my 2 key areas are firstly pharmacy, so DM&D, which is addiction medicines and devices, and that's the NHS standard for communicating information about medicines across different IT systems, and it's used in electronic prescription service and e-prescribing, secondary care, for example. And my other key area is GS1, and I'm the SRO for the NHS standards for GS1, which are DAPB 0108 and DCB 1077. So this when you look at the title of this session, Transforming Medications Safety with a Single Scan, this is really at my alley. This is actually encompassing both sides of my work. And I just think you'd be dumbfounded to know that I think it's a really good idea. And the point of my medicines standard is actually to make sure we can communicate across the entirety of the patient journey seamlessly, and making sure we can do it electronically, make sure we can reduce transcription errors and not going from actually just sending paper from one person to the next. And introducing a scan into that as well is also going to actually reduce that transcription error load. So completely onto a winner. But I just wanted to raise a few words of caution. Even though I think it's a massive move forward in patient safety, all this is about change. And when we actually do change, as Julian said earlier on, change can actually introduce more new errors into the system. And we've got to be really careful we don't do that. And the way we don't do that is to make sure we're all using good, solid standards and all using the same standards as well, which is really key to this. But we've also got to make sure we've got good, solid underpinning data. And stating the bleeding obvious, but if we're going to scan something into the clinical record, we need to interface the GS1 scan into the drug dictionary. And that's really key to doing that. We need to get that map clinically safe as well. And we need to make sure that we're doing that en masse rather than everybody doing it individually, making sure we've got one central way of doing that. And there's no PIM for medicines. There is no way of doing a PIM for medicines. So what we do with my DMD, my terminology baby, is at our package level entity, the AMPP level, we have a map to the GTIM. And we populate that into our DMD database. But it's not as easy as it sounds, because getting the information out of suppliers is really quite difficult. So we have to go to suppliers and say, please give us your information so we can put it into DMD. And we are completely reliant on the suppliers giving us information because nowhere else has got it, because the MHRA don't hold it. It's not part of the licensing route, so we have to go and find it. And we have trouble getting it out of pharma because they don't seem to understand the importance of getting it right. And we get pharma sometimes reuse GTINs, they actually assign wrong GTINs, they actually give us the wrong information. We've had instances of them giving us the GTIN for the 50 milligram pack and assigning it to the 5 milligram pack, and that, potentially massive patient safety issues arising there. And so the problem I'm seeing is pharma is they're seeing GTINs as a supply chain thing, and we're now starting to use them in clinical purposes. And I think the message needs to get across that we've got to make sure that the safety angle is covered as well. This is really important information. We've got to get it right, and we've got to get that message across. And very quickly, a new issue coming to us as well. This is off the back of the disapplication of FMD, and it's since the implementation of the Windsor framework at the start of this year. And this is something that's coming back to us from trusts actually working on the front line. And they're saying they're not seeing 2D data matrix or barcodes on UK-only packs. This is increasingly through the supply chain since the 1st of January this year. Yes, the linear is still on there. Yes, we have access to the GTIN. That's good. But some of the UK-only packs are coming through with no 2D barcode on them at all. And that's having practical implications for the trust, because obviously if you take away the 2D barcode, you're taking away the serialisation. And this means, for example, increased risk of expired medication going through the supply chain, increased complexity of recalls, and it stops the innovation that we're trying to get to with Scan for Safety, for example. And over the last couple of days, we've been talking a lot about all the benefits of Scan for Safety and all the amazing things we're going to do with UDI devices. If we don't have the 2D barcode on the packs for medicines, we're not going to realise that for medicines. That's a real loss, really is a loss. Now, the guidance from the MHRA on 2D barcodes on packs, on UK-only packs, is that suppliers may put them on if they choose to. So they can put them on, but some of them are choosing not to. And so transforming medication safety with single scan, yes, I'm all in for that. But my concern is at a time we're starting to actually talk more about scanning for meds, and it's so great to be on centre stage. I think it's great to have medicines on centre stage at GS1 for the first time. We're looking at a digital medicines programme within NHSE. We're looking at closing meds administration, and Anna's speaking to that at 11 o'clock, so please go and see that. We've got the pharmacy group with GS1. We've got all these exciting things going on, but it's reliant on that good, strong data. If we don't have the underpinning good GTIN data and the 2D barcodes available, then this isn't going to happen.
So, I think that's really interesting to see that when you have the language around optionality, what then ends up happening in practice. So it's really helpful to hear about what's happening on the front lines, and particularly, I'm not surprised to hear that as a pharmacist, you want all the information to be just right.
To speak up on that, I've worked at standards for a long time, and in implementation we have the 3 words. We have must, shoulds, and mays. And in 25 years, it's hard enough getting suppliers to do the musts. If it's a may, they ain't going to do it.
So then that brings us maybe a good opportunity for our colleague here from the MHRA to also respond about future directions that the initiatives that you're working on for patient safety.
So just agree with Jo really that the GS1 standards would play a crucial role really in improving patient safety and enhancing that traceability and efficiency. And I think it's, again, really important that we differentiate between the illegal trade, and we've got to remember that barcodes are also subject to falsification as well as QR codes and things like that. Criminals are very good at using those. You'll probably know that, Oksana.
Well, the cases that we looked at with the Ozempic in the UK, some of them had a legitimate barcode, but inside was a falsified product. So it's not a silver bullet per se, but that's why we need many layers of protection.
It's not a silver bullet, but it's certainly a helpful building block and definitely supports that traceability through the legal supply chain. I guess from my standard, if I'm thinking about it from patient safety and what we do at MHRA, if we have an adverse drug reaction or an adverse incident related to a medical device or to a medicine, what's really important for us is understanding what was the product that might have caused that. So, in a sort of Nevada, if you like, I would be able to see exactly what was the medicine, potentially through a scannable barcode or something that was in the electronic healthcare record, or through a UDI scanned into the electronic healthcare record in a structured field, which would allow me then to pull out that record, that particular record, and then look to see what was the patient journey after that point, and what other medicines did they have and what other interventions did they have. So that would be perfection. At the moment, what we can do is search for medicines, but we cannot search for devices. So that is something that is currently a real barrier to patient safety, because it's not possible to know what device a patient potentially has implanted or what device they may be using. But in the absence of that, and certainly in the online world, what we're trying to think about is what risk mitigations we can put in place. So certainly we're looking to inform patients about illegal websites or fake medicines, but other things we're doing for the online, particularly for the online market, is where we know a medicine is particularly accessed online, what we would do is say, okay, that healthcare professional conversation may now be missing. So what can we do in order to make sure a patient was better informed? If we had electronic product information where you could scan a code, hopefully go to the right site and not to the wrong site, that would be incredibly helpful, because the patient could then access more information, more detailed information, potentially videos and other graphics that are not possible to put on the patient information leaflet. Other things we're doing for PACs for medicines, is putting in a patient card. So, as you noted, the patient information leaflet is tiny font. It's not necessarily easy to read or navigate. So what is the key information we might want a patient to see? So pulling that out and pushing on a patient card for something that is accessed predominantly online is one of the alternatives we're looking at, and we have done that recently for finasteride, for a particular product that is only accessed online, is not prescribed through the NHS. So thinking a little bit outside the box, what more can we do to try and promote patient safety, as well as giving those really strong public health messages about not buying online and ensuring that conversation with a healthcare professional.
Thank you so much. So I think with our remaining time, it'd be a good idea to maybe open up for questions for our panel. So if we could take anything from the audience or get the mic passed around.
Hi, Hannah Cooner, University Hospitals, Leicester. I'd just like to know, how likely is it that there'll be regulations put in place on drug manufacturers to add their product to the DMND in the future?
Right. So D&D is an NHS standard. It's Sky 0052, and as part of the standard, it states that drug manufacturers must put their information into D&D. The problem we've always had is something that came up quite a lot yesterday, is policing of standards. So the fact that they don't all do that is actually something we can't make them do at the moment. So our standards we just have no teeth in them. But I'm not sure how much you know about standards, but we have the Data Use and Access Bill coming through, the Laws and Commons at the moment. Not quite sure whereabouts it's at, but it should be through to the Royal Assent by the end of this year. So the DUA states that now people, if you don't actually pay due regard to a standard, then you can face financial penalty. This used to be directed at just NHS providers, but now it's actually directed at system suppliers as well. And it's directed at anybody who uses a standard. So with the DUA coming in, if people don't pay due regard to standards and do what the standard tells you to do, so pharma not giving us the information, then they can face financial penalty under the DUA.
Okay. Great question. Do we have some more? Oh, front row maybe? Oh, okay. Yeah. And then we'll take the one in the front.
Hi, Martin Ford from Somerset Foundation Trust. I'm an inventories manager down there. I think it's really, really positive, the stuff that you're all doing. But to my mind, Oksana mentioned about the Kardashians and people like that, high-profile people who are actually doing dangerous things by promoting selling illegal or falsified drugs and stuff. I've got a young son myself who's 11 years old, and he watches a lot of like videos online and things like that. And I find that the youth of today are quite influenced by social media and things like that. Is there anything we can do more to protect our kids and younger people from getting from the sorry.
I understand
You know
the
what I'm
question.
saying.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Before I get sued by the Kardashians, I would just like to clarify that her advert of diclogis was within the legal correct parameters. FDA did ask her to remove it only because she did not list all the side effects written on the post as well. But it was of a legal medicine. She did not encourage people to go to a falsified website. However, the bigger question that you're asking is, what do we do to protect young people that are influenced by these social media influencers, but also the platforms themselves. And I think the most important thing to do is to keep the social media / tech companies accountable, because they are the ones that have this platform in which falsified medicines, there are cases in the United States where some medicines used, such as Adderall, have been laced with fentanyl. Teenagers, college students dying as a result of purchasing medicines to help them study. Again, they're taking those risks, but those sellers remain on those platforms even after parents have notified the company, complained to the company, spoke to government officials, spoke to the police, and no one can really enforce it. Typically what we see is that if there's a journalist breaking a big news story, then the platforms may take some action to remove particular things, but the accountability around and it is a whack-a-mole problem, because as soon as they close one, they can pop up another somewhere else, but they're not really doing even the bare minimum, and they're not held legally accountable. They're not held legally accountable globally. So that's the most deregulated space, and one in which I think there is a lot of risks beyond just falsified medicines themselves.
I suppose the only thing I would add is that we do try and take these sites down, and we do if they're UK-based, but often they're offshore, which then have limited powers to act. I think that what we really need to do is act on both parts of the pathway. So we need to try and reduce supply, which is what we're trying to do and what we did yesterday through the Criminal Enforcement Unit and other actions. But we need to work on the demand side as well, because that's the key. And if we can counter some of these posts. And we constantly put out messaging from MHRA. It's probably not the place most teenagers go. So how can we use other routes to try and promote that these are not safe sites, you're not getting safe medicines, this is not the way to access the help that you need, and to try and then direct them into other avenues where they can seek help if that's what they need. So I think that's key, reduce the supply, but also try and act on the demand, because that's what the criminal organised force gangs, that's where they will seek the demand.
Yeah.
There was the massive own goal of removing the need for FMD at the beginning of the year. It was like, wow, it was in football, you wouldn't need a video referee for that, would you? It was incredible. But it's very interesting when you start to use the FMD barcode. We've just done a study of 90 retail pharmacies, and there's quite a lot of expired stock, 2% across these, out there in the marketplace. So even in the regulated, completely safe pharmacies that have got thousands of packets, they're supposed to check every month. And this is a study we've done in UK and Ireland, and I think there's that and the data PIM. Wow, with parallel imports, 1,200 and 1,200 between here and India that have got license to supply in this country, all with their own GTIN. It's a massive undertaking that, to try and report on this stuff and understand it is I'd love to talk more about it and how to, make something usable. So, yeah.
Obviously, parallel import is within the scope of FMD, and indeed, this is why I love the data matrix code so much. The expiry date is in there, so I think in future we can definitely envisage even a warning to the patient when they scan a code with their package leaflet. They can get the information that the medicine is expired. I know it doesn't exactly address the problem of the expired medicines being there on the shelf, but it provides the up-to-date information. It doesn't wait 6 months for a package leaflet to finally run out of circulation. So I think there are a lot of really good opportunities there. The fact that, of course, in the EU we know all about parallel trade, and this is also covered with the FMD implementation.
And do you foresee it fully replacing
That's the hot topic of the moment. Yeah. And I think in certain types of medicines, such as hospital use only medicines, where in fact paper is not ever reaching the patient, I think this could be a first step. But always, I think the EU position will always be that the paper will be available when a patient wants to have paper. It's only to increase the ways in which we make the information available to the patient.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that I'll let our panelists have maybe one final thought, and then we'll close the session for today. So I'll start with Joe, with your one thing you'd like to leave the audience with today.
Oh gosh, just the application of standards, just wherever you're going. For me, it's having worked 25 years in standards, and I keep banging on about them, but without those, and without making sure everyone's doing the same thing the same way, we're not going to realise any patient safety benefits.
I was about to say the exact same thing. Global standards, ISO, IDMP, HL7, these are the GS1. It's the use of these standards that are giving us so much value and synergies across hundreds of healthcare systems. So I can only agree on that topic.
And final word.
I suppose I just would talk about standards, yes, but technological innovations, because we see that the social media and that type of power. So in leveraging these types of technological innovations, I think will really help to improve patient safety.
Yeah, we've got some catching up to do on that front for sure. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and to your questions as well.
Thanks so much.